Bruchim Aboim B'Shem Irgin Shir Torah. I would like to welcome everyone to today's shir from Rabbi Yakov Zev Smith Shlita on the topic of liquids and Hilchos Shabbos. Whoever would like to have the great schus of sponsoring a shir, call Irgin Shir Torah at 718-851-8651.
We recently had an interesting shaila where someone prepared the Shabbos Suda and they forgot to put the soup, the chicken soup, onto the fire. So it comes Shabbos and the chicken soup is in the refrigerator. They're having guests and you can't have a Suda without hot soup, but you can't serve cold soup. So the question was, is there any eights to somehow to warm a cold liquid on Shabbos? So this led us on a journey to learn the sugya, the halacha of bishul regarding liquids, which as we'll see, includes many other shaylas about, besides warming soup, but questions of hot drinks, and many other shaylas regarding liquids, specifically liquids on Hilchos Shabbos. So we have to learn is basically a Mishnah, and hopefully once we have that bit of information, we could proceed with all of our shaylas. The Mishnah says in Masechta Shabbos, Kuf Mem Hey Amud Beis, Kol Sheba B'Chamen Mi-Erev Shabbos. So Rashi, whatever was cooked, any food that was cooked before Shabbos, Shayrin Oisei B'Chamen B'Shabbos. Lamashal, you cooked the potato, you cooked a piece of chicken on Erev Shabbos, and now it's cold. And you want to rewarm that cooked food. Zok the Mishnah, as long as it was cooked before Shabbos, you're allowed to rewarm a cooked food on Shabbos. In other words, for example, you have a piece of chicken that's cold, you want to make it warm to serve the children. You could take the chicken, put it into the hot pot of soup when it's off the fire, leave the chicken in the soup. By the time you finish serving the soup, you'll find the chicken nice and warm to serve the children. The question is, how could you do that? The Shulchan Aruch in Shin Yud Ches Sif Tes says that a kli rishon, a pot of food, even if it's not on the fire, is fully capable of cooking. A hot pot of soup, even without a fire, is fully capable of cooking. So how could you put a piece of cooked chicken into the hot pot and rewarm it? The kli rishon is able to cook it. The answer is, that's the obvious chiluk. Since the piece of chicken was cooked already, now you're not recooking it, it's cooked already. What you're doing is you're rewarming. That's the concept of ein bishul acha bishul. Once chicken is cooked, it's cooked. What you're doing now is you're not recooking it, ein bishul acha bishul, you're rewarming it. That, we know, is the halacha of ein bishul acha bishul. But to put it very bluntly, ein bishul acha bishul is not just an halacha, it's a metzius. This piece of cold chicken is fully cooked. If it's cooked, you can't make a second cooking. So that's why it's mutar lechatchila to put the chicken into a hot pot, even though it will get steaming hot, because once it's cooked, you can't recook it. What are you doing? You're rewarming it. Rewarming is not bishul. Now you're wondering, so if you're such a breit and mechutin, if you're allowed to rewarm chicken, why do we have to put it into a hot pot of soup that's off the fire? Take the chicken, put it onto the blech, or put it into the hot pot cooking on the fire. So that's something that we all know. That's the issa of chazorah. Of course, there's no issa to chazer your gemara. That's a mitzvah. But chazorah is an important word for today. To take any food, even if it's fully cooked, even if it's still hot, and take it from off the fire and put it onto the fire, that's the issa d'rabbanan of chazorah. We don't do. So to take any food and put it onto the fire, into a pot, on the fire is awesome. We're talking about today, you're taking a piece of fully cooked food, putting it either on top of a cholent pot, which is on the fire, or putting it into a kli rishon that's off the fire. Once there's no issa of chazorah, you're allowed to rewarm the food. If you look in the Rashba, Daf Mem Amud Beis V'Maschol Mikol Makom, he explains the Mishnah, just as I told you, that you're allowed to rewarm a cooked food, but chazorah is still awesome. Now, so let's talk tachlis. Our cold soup that's in the refrigerator, why don't we say the same idea? Since the soup was fully cooked, you're allowed to rewarm it. Put it tichveis on top of a cholent pot, put it on the side of the blech. If you have a radiator, you could take the pot and put it on the radiator. That's not chazara because that's not derech bishul on a radiator. And l'chayra, presumably, if you put a pot onto a radiator, it might cook the soup. It might warm the soup significantly. And the emes is the pashtus of our Mishnah. Kol sheba b'chamin mi erev Shabbos. Whatever was cooked erev Shabbos, you're allowed to rewarm. L'chayra would include even soup, even liquids. And indeed, the Ran in Daf Chav Beis, the Daf Arif, and the Rashba that I mentioned all make this point. Any food, liquid or solid, as long as it's fully cooked, you're allowed to rewarm it on Shabbos as long as there's no issa of chazara. However, we know that's not the case. And this is based on Rashi and Daf Lamed Daled, and the Ran that I mentioned, quoting Rabbi Yoina, that make an interesting chiluk. A solid food, a davi yavesh, a dry food, chicken, kugel, sunti, kneidlach, etc., ain bishul acha bishul. But a liquid, lemashal, our cold soup, that yesh bishul acha bishul, even though it was fully cooked before Shabbos. And this is something that we seem to remember. You can't rewarm a cold liquid. But the question is, manishtana, if we just explained that once it's cooked, you can't recook it, so why is a liquid different? So the answer, which is really the aside that we need for today, is, let's start from a simple example. Water is fully drinkable as it is. And that's why if a guy cooks water, there's no issa b'shalakam, because water is fully usable as it is. You can't take raw water and make it cooked water. That doesn't make sense. Like chicken, you make cooked to raw. Kneidlach from raw to cooked. Kneidlach raw to cooked. Why is the bechlal bishul by water? The teretz is you make a hot cup of water. That's a whole different metzias. The bishul by water is not making it from raw to cooked. The bishul by water is making it from cold to hot. In other words, the bishul is warming it. Oh, now you have a cold cup of tea. So the Lamda will say, it's not a cold cup of tea, it's not tea. I mean, today, rather, they have the iced tea, so the mush is a little harder to relate to, but I think we all appreciate that a cold cup of tea is not tea. What is the bishul by chicken? You made it from raw to cooked. Even though now it's cold, but it's still cooked chicken. Ein bishul acha bishul is a metzius. But when it comes to a liquid, hot water, hot tea, the bishul is not cooking it and making it from raw to cooked. The bishul is warming it. Now that it got totally cold, if you rewarming, you are actually being mevashel it. So we'll say the same reality. Ein bishul acha bishul is a metzias by salad. And yesh bishul acha bishul is the reality by liquids. Because if the water became cold, it's no longer bishul. Now you are warming it, you are actually cooking. So the basic chiluk is in the fact that once it's cold, it's no longer hot drinks. Now, of course, you'll ask, but by cooked chicken soup, it's still chicken soup. So that didn't go away. That effect remains. But Rabbi Yashiv explains that we look at liquids as one group, and liquids yesh bishul acha bishul. But we can't forget that the Ran and the Rashba hold, even by liquids ein bishul acha bishul. I guess when you cook water, you have a certain effect that remains. You sterilized it. There's no longer germs. So we have a machlaikis rishonim if yesh bishul acha bishul by liquids. How do we paskin? So that's an important question. So two places, the Mechaba in Shin Yud Ches Dalet and Shin Yud Ches Tezvav, paskins lahachmir. That when it comes to a liquid, yesh bishul acha bishul, presumably if you rewarm a cold water, it's malacha deraisa. The Ramah brings the makilim, v'nagu lahakol, imloy nitztanen legamri. If the liquid is still warm, you're allowed to rewarm it. Zok the Mishtabura, that the Ramah argues on the Mechaba, and he holds that by a dov alach, ein bishul acha bishul. Oy bazoi l'chayra, our cold soup, you have no problem. Take the cold soup out of the refrigerator and put it any place that it will get steaming hot. On top of a radiator, on top of a cholent pot, the side of the blech. But that's not true. You look at the lashon of the Ramah Taka says, Nohagu lahakol, im loy nitztanein legamri. If the soup, if the liquid is still somewhat warm, lukewarm. In other words, you can't take it out of the refrigerator and rewarm it. If the soup is somewhat loy nitztanein legamri, it did not cool entirely, then ein bishul acha bishul. But a completely cold liquid, the Ramah also agrees it's awesome. So our soup is cold, you can't rewarm it. But the question is, what does that mean, loy nitztanein legamri? If it's no longer yatzir ledes boy, zok the mechaba, yesh bishul acha bishul. The Ramah says loy nitztanein legamri, which means a lot less than yatzir ledes. It's still somewhat lukewarm. What does that mean? Halach is no such thing as loy nitztanein legamri. So the simple shot in the Ramah, zok the Magen Avram, and this Magen Avram earlier, Reish and Gimel Lamed Zayin, that the Ramah really holds that if it is entirely cold, yesh bishul acha bishul is an issa deraisa. Taking cold soup and warming it is a malacha deraisa. But the way the Paiskim explain, if it's loy nitztanein legamri, if it's still somewhat warm, so we could say the first bishul is still in existence. Look, it's still warm. The way the Rav learns, it's nechol machmas chamimusay. It's still considered hot soup. Okay, b'di'evet. But you would still consider it a hot soup. Aha. In other words, the first bishul is still here. If the first bishul is still here, we'll go back to our yisoid, ein bishul acha bishul. Because look, the first bishul is still noticeable. But if it's nitztanein legamri, then the first bishul is gone. Then the Ramah would agree to the mechaba, yesh bishul acha bishul is an issa deraisa. And Taka the Rav Shulchan Aruch and the Siddur and the Hilchos Rabsi, he says if you have some gravy, rewarming it has cold, is an issa skila. Don't forget, so it's a tricky business. If it's completely cold, it's a malacha deraisa. If it's loy nitztanein gamri, like the Ramah is mutter. But there's a different shot which has a tremendous impact on our sugya. The Pri Megadim and Reish Nud Gimel Chavtes and Shin Yud Ches Lamed Tes, but more specifically the Chazon Ish spells it out in Lamed Zayin Yud Gimel. Says a totally different shot. The Ramah holds mi'ikad didin like the Rishonim ein bishul acha bishul b'dav alach, which means even if the soup is cold, there's no din of bishul, because once something was cooked, ein bishul acha bishul. Novos, if something is totally cold, people will think, hey, he's being mechal Shabbos. Look, he took cold water, he's rewarming it. The perception is that this is no longer cooked. So as a protection, Chazal say, don't rewarm cold liquids. It's like a merzikim avashel. But mi'ikadidin, it's mutter to rewarm cold liquids. It's still asa, if it's down on the gamri, but it's not the full issa deraisa of bishul. So let's be clear before we apply it lamaisa. If you have a solid food that's completely cold, all agree you're allowed to rewarm it as long as no issa chazara. A liquid that's loy nitztanein, the Shulchan Aruch holds as asa, the Ramah holds as mutter. Once it's nitztanein, all agree you can't rewarm it. The question is, the Mechaba holds it's an issa deraisa, and the Ramah is questionable if it's an issa deraisa or not. Now, oy bazoi, our cold soup, which is from the refrigerator, all agree for all practical purposes you're not allowed to rewarm it on Shabbos. We'll soon see maybe a possible eitzah. But let's go weiter and let's try to apply it in the numerous shilas. You had unexpected guests and you're short a little bit chicken for the Friday night Suda, but you have chicken from Thursday night, but it's cold. So there's no problem. Take the chicken from the refrigerator, considering that there's no liquid gravy, put it into the soup pot when you take it off the fire, put it onto the side of the blech, put it on top of the cholent pot, put it on the radiator. As long as there's no issa chazara, you're allowed to rewarm a piece of cold chicken. You remember to make the kneidlach, the kreplach, but you forgot to warm them before Shabbos. They're sitting in the refrigerator, and you're in trouble. Yeah, you can't serve cold kneidlach, kreplach. Simple eitzah. When you're ready to serve the soup, take the soup off the fire, put the kneidlach and kreplach into the hot, kli rishon, steaming, yad nichves soup, ein bishul acha bishul, as long as there's no issa chazor. The big question that everybody asks is, listen, I mean, chicken, kneidlach, kreplach are all good examples that are basically a dava yavesh, but it all has some moisture to it, some lachluchis. So how could I rewarm any of these foods? Enochanami, the salad is mutter, but there's some moisture. Why don't we say yesh bishul acha bishul on the moisture? So the Amos, it's a good kasha. But then, what do you do with the Mishnah? I mean, today in our microwave era, we know every food has a liquid content. So how could the Mishnah allow rewarming a solid food? Every solid food has a lachluchis. The teretz for us is pashit. Because really this is a solid food. It's not that you go but roiv and miyut. The food is identified as a solid. Once this solid food is cooked, ein bishul acha bishul is a metzius. The Tzais HaShulchan in Kuf Chav Dal Sivkot Lamed Zayin, he says that a little bit lachluch is an ein boy mamish. The Eglei Tal in Sivkot Nun Hey Oiz Dal has a very lumdish word, and he says that really the lachluchis is not directly being cooked; it's a psik reisha that it's cooked. But he goes with the yisoid that really by davalach ein bishul acha bishul is mutter. It's just the chumrah. So the chumrah of psik reisha with the chumrah of ein bishul acha bishul is too much of a chumrah. That's the way he explains it. But I think the most positive pshat is the way the Chazon Ish explained that really by davalach ein bishul acha bishul. Just we perceive it looks like bishul. No, if you take a piece of knedel, kreplach, chicken, no one sees no one focuses on the lachluchis, so it's not mechzik and mavashel, and that's why you're allowed to rewarm it. So basically, a food that is really a dava yavesh, although there is moisture, the moisture is negligible. Consider the next question, approach with caution. Someone made lakshin l'kavod Shabbos. And again, they forgot to rewarm it before Shabbos. So now there's cold lakshin in the refrigerator. So, what's the difference between kneidlach, kreplach, and lakshin? The problem is that the mitzias is that after you cook lakshin, you rinse it with cold water. I never knew, but someone told me why. Because if you keep it warm, it gets more cooked even if it's off the fire. Okay, so now I learned something about cooking. But lamaisa, you always rinse cooked lakshin. Now, the lakshin has cooked lakshin, true, and uncooked cold tap water that you use it to rinse on Erev Shabbos. Or on Shabbos, you're allowed to rinse it. But the question is, now if you put this lakshin into the hot soup, you're cooking two things. The lakshin is okay, but you're cooking the uncooked cold water. You'll say, well, lachluchis, we just learned lachluchis is mutter, this is mutter. First of all, lachluchis is part of the chicken. This is not part of the lakshin. And number two, lachluchis was once cooked when you cooked the chicken. This is cold water that was never cooked. So, one eitzah, which is not practical, is if you dry all the lakshin. But if you dry the lakshin, please don't serve it to me. You lose your appetite, dried lakshin. What is the practical eitzah? So it's a very simple eitzah, and it's always a mitzvah lefarsim this because it helps in many forms. Basically, the Gemara says a kli rishon is incapable of cooking. But there's something called kali abishal. Some foods get cooked, even a kli sheni. But a kli sheni, but there a klal cannot cook. The good news based on a Gemara in Daf Mem Aleph and Daf Mem Beis, and the Shulchan Aruch and Sif Yud Beis paskas like this, water is definitely not kali abishal. In other words, water never gets cooked in a kli sheni. You could if you're interested, take a ice cube and put it into a hot bowl of soup. There's no issa bishul. Because water does not get cooked in a kli sheni. The bowl of soup is a kli sheni. Water cannot get cooked in a kli sheni. So if you don't have to dry all that wet lakshin, take the hot pot of soup, put it into a serving bowl, which you do anyhow generally, and then you could add the lakshin with all that cold water, uncooked water. Why? The water is getting cooked, but this water is in a kli sheni, the soup is in a kli sheni, and Kli Sheni is incapable of cooking water. So you don't have to dry the lakshin, put it into the serving bowl, or put it into the soup bowl, as long as it's a Kli Sheni. How do we define the word Lo Nitztanan Legamri? Let's say you have soup. What's the definition of Lo Nitztanan Legamri? So we have a pretty good idea what that means. The whole svara why Lo Nitztanan Legamri is mutter is because the first bishul is still noticeable, is still felt. So it makes sense, and Taka the Rav in Shin Yud Ches Sif Tes says this lashon, Sheroyu adayin lechol machmas chamimusay. In other words, there's piping hot soup, there's hot soup, and there's passable lukewarm soup. Zok the Rav, as long as this soup can be served as hot, it's considered hot. Now it's not piping, it's not steaming, but if it's passable as hot, that's enough that it's the first bishul is still felt. The Pri Megadim in Shin Yud Ches Lamed Tes says a lashon she'ad she'ein royu lechol. That's what considered Nitztanan Legamri. But the svar is very pashut. As long as you could serve this soup as hot, even b'di'evet hot, the first bishul is still effective. So once the first bishul is still felt, ein bishul acha bishul is a metzias. Now I know some people they have to have hot tea. You know, you pick up a cup of tea, you barely can hold a cup of tea. The person drinks it, it's a cold. You know, it's cold. He can't drink it. Okay, so there are some people that need hot. But Rabbi Yashiv Rabbi Shlomo Zalman is quoted in Or Shabbos in Chelik Aleph Gimel that says we look at Roi people have hot and have lukewarm. Okay. Next question is an interesting question someone asked me. When he has leftover chicken soup, he doesn't want to just put it back and serve it on Sunday, so he pours that into the hot cholent. Now, I'm not taking achrayus for the recipe, chicken soup and cholent, but this is what he does. He mixes the leftover chicken soup with the cholent. So, l'chayra, he said, I have no problem, because the chicken soup in the Kli Rishon is still fairly hot. So I'm not worried about bishul acha bishul. But this is an oversight, because Friday night, where is your cholent? Generally, where's everybody's cholent Friday night? On top of the fire. So you're taking the hot pot of soup from the table, after you took it off the fire, and you're putting the hot pot of soup into a cholent pot. That's not an issa bishul, that's an issa chazar. So, you know, again, there were always two factors. He avoided issa bishul, but this is an issa of chazar. In the rare case that the chicken soup was on the fire, he served it from the fire, whatever he did, and then you're allowed to take the soup from the that's on the fire, even though it's somewhat cooled off. If it's Lo Nitztanan Legamri, then his assumption was correct. I'll give you a more common case. You serve a child a bowl of soup. Not only doesn't touch, he doesn't look at it. No, he doesn't want it. Now, lamaisi is short soup. You have guests. You want to serve the soup, but this soup ready is not as hot as it used to be. So there's a simple eitzim. Take the bowl of soup, pour it back into the Kli Rishon, into the hot pot of soup that's off the fire. Then you could reserve that soup. Because the soup that the child left over was Lo Nitztanan Legamri, it's still somewhat lukewarm. Then you could add it back to the original hot pot of soup to make it considerably hotter. And then that's ein bishul acha bishul by alach shelo nitztanan. Someone had a question Friday night. He took too much cholent, and he realized that he's going to be caught because there's not enough cholent for the next day. So he wanted to put back some of his cholent. You know, there's a mitzvah of Heishav Esakzei is Mekayim on Shabbos. So he said, he was a big lamdan. He says his cholent is already dry. So even if the cholent is completely cooled, ein bishul acha bishul by a dov yavesh. So assuming that's true, but he has another problem. Because the cholent that he took off, he probably put down. So now it's an issa of chazar. Another friendly reminder, besides the issa of bishul, you have to be focused on the issa of chazar. A good example of cholent that's mutter to be returned on Shabbos, by the Shabbos Suda, you have the cholent in the Kli Rishon that's off the fire. It's still very hot. You want to pour the leftover cholent from your table back into the original cholent pot. So even if there's a big difference in temperature, but if the cholent is dry, ain't bishul acha bishul, you can put it back into the cholent pot. If the cholent is moist, is liquidy, but again, as long as it's laying its down in the gamra, you could put it back into the big kli rishon, even though it gets much warmer, because ain't bishul acha bishul by laying its down in the gamra. Someone once asked me, this goes back many years ago, but a very lumdish question, but there was a little of a mistake to it. This goes back to years ago when we still have incandescent bulbs, which means a bulb, a light bulb literally, a round bulb, that it used to give off light by the heating element, the tungsten, the filament. So we spoke then that putting a light on Shabbos is a contemporary example of the Rambam, Mr. Brewer and Shin Yud Ches in the beginning quotes it, if you cook up matches until it glows, so the Rambam is an issa of bishul. Because just like you cook chicken is also, so cooking a metal, and a metal glows until it's glowing is bishul. So all the Heintig Paiskim, actually the Paiskim, the previous generations of Chaim Oizer, said you put a light on, you're making the piece of metal glow. That's why it gives light. So someone asked, in his eyes, a lumdish question, since the light was on before Shabbos and it went off, why don't we say, ain't bishul acha bishul by a davar yavesh? Because the filament is not a liquidy, it's a solid. So a mistake, of course, is that the metal is not like the piece of chicken that gets cooked, it remains cooked. The only reason why it gives off light is because it's glowing. So once it's no longer glowing, even though it's a solid, it's like a davar lach and yesh bishul acha bishul. So the Tzushtel was mine, but the Chazenish, the Chai Adam, in Klal Chof, Siv Ches, already writes it b'shaitai, that ain't bishul acha bishul by davar yavesh. But if you heat a piece of metal, afilu meya pamim, there's still the issa, because that's like a davar lach. But such a nice einfel, I had to give him a reward. I told him, light your svar, I'll tell you another chiddush. The Zayah says if someone gets angry on Shabbos, he's oivan le'sevaru eish b'chol ma'yish v'yiseichem. Because the truth is, a person gets sikach, like we say, he's boiling mad. I said, according to you, once you get angry once, you'll have to get angry a second time, ain't bishul acha bishul. But they're both not true. Don't get angry once and enjoy Shabbos. Okay. Now, let me tell you a beautiful ha'ara l'maisa. This is based on a Chazanish, Lamed Zayin, Yud Gimel. Did you ever wonder the share of bishul when it comes to foods? The minimum share is ma'achul ben drusai, which means it's edibles slightly. When it comes to cooking liquids, the share is yatsu ledisboy. What's the chiluk? Ma'achal ben desai is not yatsu ledisboy. Why do we have two different shiurim? So the what we said, and that the Chazanish explained this, is beautiful. The bishul by foods is making it from raw to cooked. So once it's cooked, edible, albeit b'shasat chak, ma'achal ben desai, it's still considered cooked. But when you cook water, a liquid, you're not making it from raw to cooked. The bishul is, now it is a hot liquid. Hot is defined as yatsu ledisboy. It's not a bishul gather, it's a warming. Therefore the shear is not ma'achal ben desai, the shear is in yatsu ledisboy. Let me tell you a beautiful shaila that has many nafkaminas, but I'll tell you how it was presented. This is a rare shaila, but it's a very good insight into the sugya. Someone had a urn, typical urn of hot water, and the plug was pulled out. So basically the Shabbos will not be the same, he misses hot water, but he wanted to capitalize on the mistake. So he has a big urn of hot water, he's not going to be able to use it for too much longer, it's going to cool off. So he decided to make a brewed coffee on Shabbos. Now listen to his Einfeld. He took regular coffee, that's the powdered coffee, taste his choice, instant coffee, and he put it into the urn. And the assumption was it's going to have a different flavor to it. Okay, or the adenish. But that's what he wanted to do. But the question that was unique was, can you take coffee and put it into a kli rishon, into a steaming hot pot of water? Now, generally, there's no shaila you can't do that, because if the urn is still on, so it's a gabi eish, you can't put anything into it. But this, you have a rare situation that it is a hot pot of water, there's no fire. The question is, can you take instant coffee, instant tea, sugar or salt, in any of the situations, and add it to a kli rishon that's lo al gabi eish? Can you take salt and put it into a cholent pot that's off the fire? So you're probably wondering, well, coffee and tea and sugar certainly shouldn't be a shayla. Because as we spoke a number of times, instant coffee is all fully cooked. They take the coffee grind, they cook it, they make it into a thick coffee soup, so to speak. Then they remove the water either through heating, evaporation, or through the freeze-dried. But at the end of the day, all instant coffee and tea and sugar, for that matter, are all previously cooked. So, oy bazoi, what's the problem? You're allowed to put sugar into a kli rishon. You're allowed to put coffee into a kli rishon. So this fellow could put his instant coffee into the urn. Now, if the plug is still on, if it's still boiling, it's an al gabi eish, so it's chazar. But here we come to a unique question. Because coffee, tea, and sugar, do you ever notice when you put it into a cup of hot water, you no longer can find the coffee. You can't even find the sugar. Why not? The teretz is pashut. Coffee, tea, sugar, and salt are what were referred to as a soluble, which means when you put it into hot water, it liquefies. It turns into a liquid. Now, the word liquefy is a very significant word. Liquefy is like the word liquid, lach. In other words, coffee, tea, sugar, and salt are used as a powder, true, but when you put it into what you want to use it with, it turns into a liquid and is used as a liquid. So now we have a very important question. Powder, again, coffee, tea, sugar, and salt, are right now a solid, l'chayra. I mean, it's dry. It's a powder. It's used when you put it into hot and it liquefies into a liquid. Do we say it's considered a davar lach because it's used as a lach? Or maybe now when you put it in, it is yavesh. The nafkamin is, can you put coffee into a kli rishon? Can you put salt into a hot cholent that's off the fire? So they didn't have instant coffee or tea, but they had salt, they had sugar. And the Sharet Tshuva in Shin Yud Ches Sif Katan Chav Ches, and the Machzah Shekel more specifically in Sif Katan Lamed Aleph, says that since it's used as a liquid, we treat sugar and salt as a liquid. Even though in this moment you're putting it in, it's a dry food, but it's used as a liquid, it's considered a liquid. The Mishnah Berurah and Sif Katan Ayin Aleph seems to be chayshish for this. Look in the Sharet Tzion, that any powder that liquefies is considered a davar lach. There are some that are mekel, and they say, wait a minute, I put it, when I did the ma'isa, quote, the ma'isa bishul, whatever it was, putting it in, it was a davar yavesh. But we could say that the Mishnah Berurah is machmer. And that's why to add salt into a kli rishon, even if the salt was previously cooked, which some salt in America was previously cooked, but since it liquefies, it's like a liquid, yesh bishul acha bishul, by a davar lach. Generally, this doesn't pose a problem regarding coffee and tea, because no one takes coffee and puts it into a kli rishon. We are very firm. We put the water into one cup, and one cup into a second cup. So the second cup in halacha is a kli shlishi. The urn is kli rishon, first cup is kli sheni, second cup is kli shlishi. So definitely, there's no problem of adding coffee or tea or sugar for that matter into a kli shlishi. And theoretically, technically I should say, even a kli sheni, the first cup, once it's in a kli sheni, we could assume ein bishul acha bishul, and especially you could rely on those that hold it's considered a davar yavesh. Question, it sounds has no shaykhs to our sugya, but it's very much shaykhs to our sugya. Someone had a cholent or soup, let's say either one, on a fire, and the fire was extinguished. The wind, whatever. Now he has a hot bowl of cholent or soup there's no fire. Often he notices it when the soup has considerably cooled off. Is there any eitzah to be able to serve the soup Friday night? So the question is, can I take the soup and put it onto a neighbor's blech? Let's say you have a neighbor with an air, whatever, or downstairs, upstairs, whatever the case is, we're allowed to carry. B'chayra, you're taking from a blech and putting it back onto someone else's blech. Under your blech, there's no fire, there's no eish, but you didn't take off the pot, you didn't close the fire. So the place can say you could rely on that there's no Issa Chazara because you made a fire before Shabbos. So there's no problem moving it from your blech to your neighbor's blech. But here we have to worry, what is the temperature of the soup? If the soup is no longer Yad Seledis boy, because the fire went off an hour ago, so for Svardim you can't put it onto a different blech. Because Yesh Bishul Acha Bishul B'Davalach. But for the Ashkenazim, for the Ramah, as long as it's lying its down on Legamrin, you could take the soup, put it onto someone's blech, directly onto the fire if need be, and bring it up to a hot temperature. I should mention, you don't have to run to a neighbor. If you have an oven that's on, you could take the hot pot of soup, the laying it down in pot of soup, and put it into the oven. Because for all practical purposes, it's the same heta. Me'esh, le'esh, and laying it down in legamri. People often ask this question. They make a baby bottle. They're still making it. Remember, but basically you take hot water, and you add the formula, and you serve it to the baby. But the baby didn't want to take it, so you don't want it to get spoiled. You put it into the refrigerator. Now you have a cold bottle, you want to serve the child. You can't serve him a cold bottle. So there's a very simple eitzah. You put the bottle into a shissel, and take the kettle and pour the hot water onto the baby bottle. That, in the most, Iri is mavashal kadei klifa. It will maybe warm the bottle, cook the bottle, but it will not cook the intent, the contents, the milk inside. So it's going to rewarm it, but it won't cook it. If that doesn't work, there's another eitzah. You could take the bottle, put hot water from the urn, from the kettle, into a cup, a shissel that's dry. Now you could rewarm the bottle by putting it into that klisheni water. Why is it muta'ai? The bottle, the milk is totally cold from the fridge, but the milk is made up of water, and water does not get cooked in a klisheni. So to rewarm a bottle, you could put it either into a klisheni or pour it on from a kettle. To totally immerse the bottle into a shissel where the bottle is totally underwater, that would be a problem of atmana. But basically, this is the yesod. Next case, which is also very much our sugya, and that is the use of tea essence on Shabbos. Tea sense. So basically, tea sense, you pour water onto tea bags, and then generally the tea sense gets cold. So the Mishnah Berurah in Sifkat Lambates is concerned about this. You're going to pour this into hot water. It's a question of Yesh Bishul Acha Bishul. Why is Yesh Bishul Acha Bishul? Very pashut. Because the tea essence completely cold, and it's down on Legamri, and now there's a question of Yesh Bishul Acha Bishul. So the Mishnah Berurah recommends, what people have this minik for dairis, you make the tea essence in a chainik, in a small metal container, and keep that chainik on the blech. Keep it warm. As long as it's warm somewhat, ain't bishul acha bishul, so you could do what you want with that tea essence. What I want to mention is, we keep on saying that the tea was cooked before Shabbos. It's very possible that our chainik, believe it or not, with tea essence was never cooked. What do I mean? Many people typically take hot water, put it into that chainik, that's that metal container, and then they put the tea bags into that. What's the status of that, quote, cooked tea essence? The chainik is already a klisheni, right? So halachically, a klisheni can't cook. So the tea essence was never cooked halachically. The only thing is, you want to say that we'll consider a tea bag to consider kaliyah bishul. So kaliyah bishul does get cooked in a klisheni. So you'll rely on kaliyah bishul, in this case, as a kula. So it's much better to, if you use that chainik, take the chainik afterwards, after you put the tea bags in, and put it onto the fire. Then, when you put it onto the fire, it cooks before Shabbos, because it's on a kli rish, then it's already on the fire. Then you could add the essence as you like. Let's say someone has a cup of coffee, a cup of tea, and he made it mahadrin min a mahadrin. He wants to add milk to the coffee or lemon juice to the tea. So l'chayra, this is a problem of bishul. But the good news is that our milk, at least currently, I'll soon see why I say that, but our milk is pasteurized. Our lemon juice is pasteurized. If so, pasteurized reaches a temperature approximately of 160 degrees. 160 degrees is yad soledes by. So we'll say coffee, the milk, and lemon juice is already previously cooked. Ein bishul acha bishul. The problem is, the Noid Yehuda in the Drushes, in Drush Lamed Vav, writes very emphatically, adding milk to a hot coffee is a shash of skila because it's a question of bishul. Now, why is the Noid Yehuda so concerned about milk? The teretz is, the pashut teretz is, his milk was not pasteurized. So it's regular bishul. Oh. But then again, our milk or our lemon juice that was pasteurized should be mutter. But wait a second. Where do you take milk from? Where do you take lemon juice from? The refrigerator. It's zichen, it's tan on the gamri. So our milk and lemon juice should be like the Noid Yehuda's milk. Yesh bishul acha bishul b'dav alach. So the possible heter, which today is the minute kamat, we make coffee, we use 2 cups. So you're adding a milk into a kli shlishi. For that already you have nothing to worry about. Yesh bishul acha bishul, but not by a kli shlishi. The truth is, even adding it to a kli sheni, as long as we understand that milk is not a kali bishul, what's the problem? And the emes is, there's a Rav Shulchan Aruch in Shin Yud Ches, Sif Yud Beis, the Rav says, just like water is not kali bishul, hu adin, any liquid is not kali bishul. According to this Rav, you could add milk, never uncooked milk, into a kli. The problem is, the Noid Yehuda says milk is a chiyav chatos. He held it's only water or oil that's not kali bishul. Other liquids are kali bishul. So a very beautiful tshuva in the Cheshav Eifod, Chelu Gimel, Simimem, that explains this. The question if other liquids, milk, lemon juice, are kali bishul or not, is a machlokes the Rav and the Noid Yehuda. But Rabbi say our milk and lemon juice, le'eis ata, is already cooked. So it's only a question of yesh bishul acha bishul, so you can add it to a kli shlishi, our hot tea, hot coffee generally is a kli shlishi, and there's really no problem. Someone wants to be makel with a kli sheni, yes shall me lismay. I keep on saying that our milk le'eis ata is pasteurized because they're implementing a new method of pasteurization. It's called irradiation, where they pasteurize without any heat. Of course, everything is to save money, but there is a technique of irradiation that pasteurizes without any heat at all. So when that will be typical in milks, so the milk will be mamish, like a regular liquid that was never cooked, and we'll have to reassess what the procedure is. Someone had a moedike einfall, I say that with quotation marks. He likes to have freshly squeezed lemon on Shabbos. Now, how do you have lemon on Shabbos? He squeezes a lemon onto sugar and adds it to his tea, which the Mishnah Berurah recognizes as a solution. But I asked him, wait a minute, that lemon was never cooked. That's a fresh lemon. Yeah, but since the heter of squeezing lemon onto sugar is habalo oichel ka-oichel, so it's like an oichel ein bishul acha bishul. I said, wait a minute, there are 2 mistakes there. First of all, it does not become metzias that the lemon juice is an oichel. It merges with an oichel. But more so, even the sugar is not so posh that's an oichel. The sugar is a soluble. So he made 2 mistakes. Maybe I could be melamed chus einis achal alissa. So the whole thing was wrong. But certainly it's only a heter regarding schita. But certainly the lemon juice was never cooked. That's a very serious problem of bishul. Question. Someone had asked this question. He's noticed the cholent smells like it needs a Yeshua. It's drying, it's burning. So he's a very firm person, he knows what he's doing. He takes off the cover from the cholent, lets all the steam, the vapor dissipate. Then he takes the cholent pot, brings it to the urn, and he adds hot water to the cholent pot. Or he pours from the kettle into the cholent pot, l'chara, that should be no problem. Why? Because there's no problem of making the kettle fleishiks, because he let the steam dissipate, and he's taking water from a kli rishon, urn or kettle, and he's putting it into kli rishon cholent pot. But here we come to another application of our sugya, believe it or not. A typical urn reaches a temperature of 160, 170. Even a kettle, if it's not mamish on the fire, it's on the side of the blech, also reaches that temperature, but not much more. When you pour the water that's 160, 170 from the urn or kettle into a cholent, and the cholent al gabi ha'esh, the water now will reach a temperature of boiling, which is 212. So here we have an interesting shaila. Bringing water that's 160, 170, which is beyond Yatzei Led, is true. But bringing it up to a temperature of 212, is that a problem of Bishul on Shabbos? So Rav Moshe, in the Chelik Dal, Siman Ayin Dal, Tzif Katan Aleph, says once something is Bishul of Yatzei Led boy, more than that is not Bishul. And he brings an unbelievable raya from our Sugya. Because the Rav Shulchan Aruch writes in Shin Yud Ches Sif Tes that for Svardi, as long as the liquid is still Yatzei Ledis boy, you're allowed to warm it more than that. The only problem for the Mechabav, Yesh Bishul Achad Bishul, is when it dipped below Yatzei Ledis. But from Yatzei Ledis to boiling is Mutter L'chol HaDeis. So, okay, Moshe, what do you see from this? Once it's Yatzei Ledis boy, ain't Bishul Achad Bishul. The Oznidbru and Test Yudal says a klal, Bishul is Yatzei Ledis boy, more than that is just improvement. But the Minchas Yitzchak in Chelik Yutzim and Chavches, as many other Paiskim, say, wait a minute, that's not true. There is a certain type of tea that's hot, Yatzei Ledis boy, but a boiling tea has a whole different flavor, a whole different geschmack. Rabbi Yashiv, quoted the Oitzos HaShabbos, writes that this question from bringing from Yatzei Ledis to boiling, you're talking about a difference of, could be a difference of 50 degrees. This is loinis bar b'poiskim, and we have to be machmer. So here we have an interesting question, bringing it from Yatzei Ledis to boiling, is that bishul? Now what's lemaisa? Who could be machri and these gedolei poiskim? But let me tell you what people have on a weekly basis. I think it's again a mitzvah lefarsim. Many people still use a kettle. Now, Friday night there's soup, chicken on the fire. You can't keep the kettle on the fire. You keep it on the side. But Friday night you want a nice hot cup of tea. So you take the kettle, put it onto the fire, leave it a few minutes. You bring it to boiling, you have a cup of tea. Now we see it's not so pashut. But there's a very simple answer for that question. Before Shabbos, when you boil the water, boil it literally. Keep it until it reaches a boiling point. Then you can put it on the side of the blech and keep it hot. That is mutter l'chol hadayis. Why? Because that water reached boiling temperature. That ain't bishul acha bishul l'chol hadayis. Even though now it's only Yatzei Ledis boy, but that's mutter even like the mechaba and zichah like the ramah. So boil the water before Shabbos, and then you could bring up the temperature at your liking. As far as adding hot water from the urn, so some urns, they fluctuate. But if the urn at any point reached the temperature of boiling, then it's mutter to add it l'chol hadayis. Next important question is, we speak about two categories. There's a davar yavesh and there's a davar lach. What is the status of mayonnaise, ketchup, margarine, congealed gravy? So one thing is pashut. Every food has a little lachluchis, that's considered davar yavesh. Another thing is pashut, and Rav Moshe says this in the tshuva, and it's actually earlier paiskim as well. Rav Moshe in Sifkat and Zion of that tshuva, that if you have chicken and gravy, so the chicken is davar yavesh, but the gravy is davar lach. In Hilchas Brachis, it's one food, but has no shaychus. If you have a discernible amount of liquid, so the liquid is davar lach and the chicken is davar yavesh, so you could rewarm the chicken, but not the gravy. Rav Moshe in that tshuva was asked regarding ketchup, where the shoyel felt that ketchup, since it's so thick, it's considered a davar yavesh. So Rav Moshe says that I think that that the ketchup, the criteria to decide if it's lach or yavesh is, when you put it onto a plate, does it continue to pour, or does it just sit in one place? Lamashal, if you put a stick of margarine on a plate, it doesn't pour. But if you put ketchup on a plate, it continues to roll. It runs, it pours. So Rav Moshe says that he feels that ketchup is considered a davalach. Then I looked into it a little further. Rav Shlomo Zalman and Mara Shabbos Chelik Aleph Michtav Aleph. He says a Maradik Chiddush. He says ketchup is cooked tomatoes. Tomato we all consider davayavesh. There's the juice inside, but a tomato is davayavesh. Ketchup is just a transformed tomato and davayavesh. Rabbi Yashiv in the same Ara Shabbos Perek Vav Ois Yud Zayin has an even bigger chiddush, and he says that really a liquid that was cooked and cold lost the shem bishul, but the bishul of ketchup makes it ketchup. Ketchup tastes the same if it's cold, if it's hot. I mean, it's still ketchup. So the fact that it was cooked didn't lose the shem cooking, and therefore you treat it like a davayavesh, ein bishul acha bishul. So that means, and I should mention Rav Shlomo Zalman and Shulchan Shloim Yud Ches in the Hara Mem Zayin in the bottom, he says the second cooking of ketchup doesn't make it any better. So for that reason, Rav Shlomo Zalman, Rabbi Yashiv felt that a ketchup is considered a davayavesh. So let's put this lamaisa. Someone wants to spice up his cholent. He takes the cholent pot off the fire. He adds ketchup into the hot, steaming cholent. Like Rabbi Yashiv, Shlomo Zalman, it's mutter. It's davayavesh, ain't bishul acha bishul. Like Rav Moshe, that's a problem because it's a davalach, yesh bishul acha bishul. But if you want to have your ketchupy cholent, there's a simple eitzah. Take the cholent and pour it into a serving bowl, mix the cholent, and then you could serve it kazun tehei. One thing I will mention, Rav Moshe in Chelik Dalet Ayin Dalet Tiv Cotton Hay, he says to put ketchup onto a hot, steaming piece of meat is also mutter. Dava Gush is like a Kli Rishon. So Moshe says here we have two chumras that overlap. First of all, Dava Gush, Kli Rishon is a machlokes hapaiskim. And number two, even though ketchup is a dava lach, but it's only a chumrah yesh bishul acha bishul by dava lach and Moshe l'shitasai. So if you have two chumras overlap, you could be makel, so you could put ketchup onto hot potato, hot meat, l'chol days. Butter or margarine is interesting, because butter or margarine, now please don't put butter in your cholent, of course. I'm talking about on V'chaves, you have a hot potato by Shal Shudis during the summer. But butter or margarine are right now definitely a salad. I mean a congealed salad. But it's when you add it to a hot food, it becomes a liquid. So the question, how do we look at a butter or margarine? So the Magen Avraham Sif Cotton Mem is clear that he's talking about this congealed food in fanda, whatever it is, like type of a kugel that has a congealed part of it. He says it's considered a davayavesh. Because when you're doing the maisa of putting it near the fire, it's solid. So according to the Magen Avraham and the Mishnah Berurah and Sif Cotton Kuf and the Chazon Ish and Laim Mazayin Yud Paskins like this, butter, margarine, congealed food is considered a davayavesh. The Taz, Sif Cotton Chof, the Levush, Sif Cotton Tezvav insist that's not true. Because when it falls apart, when it liquefies, it's a liquid. So basically, we definitely have what to be Saimechan, since the Mishnah Berurah is Mekel. But one thing I will say, and I saw this in the Orcha Shabbos, Amid Tezvav, and I think it's very mistavra. If you have cold soup, when you put it in the refrigerator, it sort of hardens. That's not considered a davayavesh. Why? Because you don't use it in that state. And I say, Varaya, imagine this Einfall. Imagine I take boiling water, I put it into the freezer, and I make ice cubes. So I'll say, Ein bishul acha bishul by davayavesh. Ice cubes are solid. But that's ridiculous. Why? Because you're using it in its liquid form. So when something is congealed, lamashal pacha, we use it as a salad. Even though it's only congealed, that's the machlokes Magen Avraham and Taz. Next group of questions, where the shaila is, where someone had a good cup of coffee or tea, and it hit the spot, he wants to have a second cup of coffee or tea. So he wants to use the same mug, same cup, and pour hot water into that cup. The problem is the droplets of the previous tea are totally cold. Or a bigger question, where someone used a mug that someone previously used, was rinsed. So the cup has droplets of uncooked, rinsing water that was never cooked. So this is really part of a different share, as we'll see, because it has a whole different twist to it. But basically, Rav Moshe in Sivkat and Yutes makes a Pashat Chilik. And Moshe says that if the tea has droplets from a previous tea, mi'ikad din, there's no more bishul, ain't bishul achad bishul, but davalach. So you could be makel to add water to that because the tea was previously cooked. It's only a chumrah. Oh, so he says, but in this case, there are other tzadim to be makel. Now the truth is that's part of a different share, but really you're not mechaven to cook those droplets. It's very little, and it's only an irui from a kli rishon. So Moshe says to pour hot water onto droplets that were never cooked, that's bishul. To pour it onto droplets that were cooked, there is what to be seimecha. The Minchas Yitzchak insists that this should not be done. You should dry even a previously used tea. But some are makel, especially if you shake out the cup, all you're left with is mamish, something that's microscopic. So it's part of a different I hope to do maybe next month. But basically the Yisayid HaDavar is when you have droplets, there's a chilik if the droplets were ever cooked or never cooked. The same question is when you reuse a ladle for serving soup or the like, if there are droplets of soup that were previously cooked, l'chayra, it's nistan and lagamri. But this case is a little worse, because the ladle is going back into a kli rishon. And kli rishon is more of a problem of real bishul. The urn with the indicator level, you open the spigot and the water level drops. So those urns are a big problem, because the water level that drops, it's not magical. The water level that drops when the water is consumed goes back into the original urn. That's the mitzvah. It doesn't fly out. So this is again part of the next year that I hope to do maybe next month already. But basically, if you have an urn that the spigot, the water indicator level, was once cooked, even though it cooled considerably, then we have the basic heta of yesh, ein bishul acha bishul, by a davalach, shaloi nitztan and legamri. Achrein chav, let me share something that's absolutely beautiful. The question we began with. Someone had soup, he forgot to rewarm it before Shabbos. Now he has a problem. But listen to his Einfall, he's a very aggressive lamdan. He will take the soup, take the cold soup from the refrigerator, and put it next to the radiator. Or during the summer, put it outside in the sun. What's he doing? He's going to make it slightly lukewarm. Then he'll take the soup and put it on top of a cholent pot and make it steaming hot. What are you doing? Well, it was laying stand on the gamri, ain't bishul acha bishul. So the emes is, it doesn't sound right, but then again, why not? So the truth is, if you go with this, I have a better idea. Why do you have to work so hard? Take the soup out of the refrigerator, put it on top of the cholent pot, say, Baruch Shalom, don't worry, I know what I'm doing. Give me a minute. I'm only going to make it loyin it stan and legamri, and then I'll let it go, because once it's loyin it stan and ain't bishul acha bishul. That really doesn't sound kosher. But why not? But let me make it more gishmak. The Magen Avram in Reish Nun Gimel Sif Kat and Memal discusses the following question. He's pouring hot water from an urn, from a kettle, onto a plate that's dirty. He wants to wash dishes on Shabbos. But there's a layer of congealed gravy on the plate. So the Magen Avram said you can't pour hot water onto the congealed gravy because it's moiled. You are changing the gravy, the solid, to a liquid. Freg the Heilige Rabbi Akiva Eiger on the page, you worrying about moiled derabanan? This is bishul deraisa. But listen to Rabbi Akiva Eiger's agoinis. The first pour of water makes the congealed gravy into a liquid. Right? It makes it into a lach. The second pour is cooking mamish. What's the heta? So Rabbi say this is mamish our shayla, and Rabbi Akiva Eiger holds it's a problem. But the Magen Avram is makel, and Rabbi Akiva Eiger is makel. We'll soon see why. So now we have a double problem. What's wrong with our two-step process, making it loyin itztana and then bishul? And if it is wrong, why is it mutter in Rabbi Akiva Eiger's case to pour hot water onto congealed gravy? So let me tell you, Shimu Sechi Nafshechem was worth coming just for this Yisoid. What's Taka de Pshat? Why loyin itztana and legamri is mutter? In Bishul, it's not on the map, it doesn't count. The teretz, like we explained earlier, if it's loyin itztanan, the original Bishul is still noticeable, is here, ain't Bishul acha Bishul. Memela, this is what I think what Kivega means to say. If you take water and pour it onto congealed gravy, this gravy is a davar yavesh. Davar yavesh, the first Bishul is still here, ain't Bishul acha Bishul by davar yavesh. So you pour water onto it, it's perfectly mutter. Now that it liquefied, it's weiter mutter. Why? Because the first bishul is here and it's still warm. Masha'en in our case, you took out soup from the refrigerator and you put it next to the radiator. It's loyin itztan lagamri, mazel tov, fine. Now what do you want to do? Loyin itztan, I want to put it on top of the pot. Wait a second. The first bishul is totally gone, even though you made your spiel with loyin itztan lagamri. Right? Because it's not bishul. The first bishul is gone. What do you want to do? You want to make a new bishul. Yes, bishul acha bishul. It's only when it's a solid that Kiveg is mekel. And the Avinez and Kuf Chavtes is the exact same yisoid. What bothered me to no end, after this golden alumnus, Kiveg says, Vadayin Tzarachian. He throws a monkey wrench. Why Dayin Tzarachian? So Libi Oimeli, maybe the pshat is because since the congealed gravy is used as whatever, in that case, when you heat it, it becomes a lach, maybe it's like powder. But one thing I will say, for our hot soup that you need an eitzah, I'll tell you two eitzahs to whom it may concern. One eitzah, I saw the Orletzin in Lamed Yud Gimel and the Hilchos Shabbos B'Shabbos Chesa over 111 say, take the soup out of the refrigerator and you're allowed to put it into a place where it will get below Yad Siledispa. You're allowed to warm it, but not cook it. We don't usually put something where it could get cooked, but in this case, since really aim bishul acha bishul is mutter miyakiridin, it's only a chumrah. You could be makel to do it until you get to yatsi lettuce. Usually we don't do that when it comes to bishul mamish, but this is not bishul mamish. You could do it midway to take out the chill to make it lukewarm. And the second eitzah, which the Bialach in the end of Reish Nun Gimel says, you could have a goy actually rewarm it. You can have a guy cook on Shabbos, but here we'll say that really ain't bishlach a bishul b'davalach. It's only a chumrah. B'mokim tzarich, you can rely on this. Agutun tog to you all.
Shem Yirgensher. I'd like to give a big yeshakar to Smith for today's share. Smith will say a seekum of today's share in 5 minutes. So, Chananya ben Akash Yem Ratzak Rishpov Lazakis is Yisrael. Bigger Hebron Tayr Mitzvah Shnam Adonai Chofes Aman Tzidka Yagdol Tayr V'Yadeh.
When do we say children in the stomach for your Lord?
Everyone, please take your coffees and all other liquids, and we'll have the seekum of the liquids and Shabbos. Shh. Just take a few minutes.
I'll quiet it down. Just a short summary, learn today, Bez Hashem. One thing is clear, it's a Mishnah by a Davi Yavish, by a dry food, ein bishul acha bishul. Once it was cooked, the understanding is that the food is cooked, the chicken is cooked. You can no longer recook something that's cooked. It's a metzias that ein bishul acha bishul. There is no subsequent bishul. Of course, you have to make sure not to put it onto a fire. That's the issa of chazara, putting onto a blech like onto a fire. But basically, you're allowed to rewarm a cooked food as long as there's no issa of chazara. When it comes to a lach, all agree that by a lach, shenitztanen legamri, both the Mechaber and the Ramah agree that there's an issa of bishul. The question is, like Mechaber, it's an issa deraisa, like the Ramah, it could be the raisa, it could be the rabbanon, but basically, even though there are some hold ein bishul acha bishul entirely by a lach, but we are choishish yesh bishul acha bishul. So to rewarm a cold soup is also l'chol hadayis. If it's nechal machmas chamimusay, if it's still considered hot, it's still passable, albeit b'diavad. So for the Svardim, Machabashit is still yesh bishul acha bishul, as long as if it's not yad seledes by. Ashkenazim, once it's nechal machmas chamimusay, the Rav says that lashon, then it's considered hot and ein bishul acha bishul. To rewarm cold kneidlach, kreplach is okay, as long as no chazara. Lakshin that has uncooked water, either you could dry the water, but much easier to put the lakshin into, put the soup into a kli sheni, into a serving bowl, and put the lakshin there, and then serve it. There's always a little bit of natural lachluchis, that doesn't count, that's really part of the food. The definition of loinitztan and legamri is nechol machmas chamimuse, because then the original bishul is still functional. To pour soup into leftover soup into cholent is not a problem of bishul, it's a problem of chazara. To pour leftover soup into the hot pot of soup, then that's not chazara, because it's off the fire, and then there's no problem of bishul as long as the soup is still loinitztan and legamri. By a light, by a piece of metal, by any type of scenario where the bishul is not cooking it but making it glowing, so by a piece of metal, yesh bishul acha bishul. So putting on a light on Shabbos, of course, is awesome. Powder, coffee, tea, sugar, or salt is questionable if it's considered a davar yavesh, because now it's dry, but it turns into it liquefies, it's soluble, so place can treat it as a davar lach, but today we have cups, different cups, For coffee, you have 1 cup, 2 cups, so avad it's mutter, there's no problem. To move a soup when the fire went out, if it's laying its down in lagamri, and there's no issa of chazara, there's no issa of bishul. Rewarming a baby bottle, you could immerse it into hot water or pour hot water onto it. As long as no issa batmana, that's fine. Tea essence should be kept al gabi eish or close to the eish to keep it still laying its down in lagamri, or better yet would be to cook it before Shabbos entirely. And then you have a stan in lagamri, you could add it even to a hot cup of tea. Adding milk and lemon juice, if it's pasteurized, then ain't bishul achabishul, it's only a chumrah, but you could add it to a klisheni. If whenever they start using milk that was not pasteurized, so then it's a serious problem. If it could be, according to Noid Yehuda, a question of kali abishul, and you will not be able to add cold milk that was not pasteurized even to a klisheni, so then when you have 2 cups, that would be the heter. Lemon juice onto sugar cannot be added to a hot tea because the lemon juice was never cooked. To add hot water to a dry cholent is okay if the hot water once reached boiling temperature. If the 8th before Shabbos is, you move to boil the water in the kettle to a boiling point, then you could move it onto the fire, off the fire, as long as it once reached the boiling point. It's ein bishul achabishul l'chol hadayis. Once it was totally boiling, then you could bring it from Gatziledis boy up to boiling. Ketchup is machlokes apoisim if it's considered lach or yavesh, but practically you could add it to a hot food and you could add it to a klisheni. So basically it's not much of a chilik. Butter or margarine or congealed food is considered a davar yavesh. To pour hot water into a cup of uncooked droplets should not be done. To pour into previously cooked droplets from a previous tea, there are different shitas. It's possible to dry it, but if not, the best eitzah grada would be to put the hot water into a cup and then pour it onto the droplets. That's mutter even uncooked droplets because the water, it cannot be cooked in a klisheni. To put a ladle back into a soup pot, if it's laying its down on the garmi, is fine. The water indicator level is an issue. Hopefully we'll talk about it a different time, more barichis. But basically, soup that was left in the refrigerator, you can't rewarm it on 2 steps, because that's the problem of yesh bishul achabishul. The eitzah is either to put it to a place that it could reach passable temperatures, but not yatziledis boy, or have a guy put it onto the blech on Shabbos. To rewarm it, not on the blech, that's chazar, but to rewarm it on Shabbos.
It's better to make to put the tea bags in first and make era in order to make it.
Yeah, okay, but so he was only Rashi. I'm sorry, they clean us. Okay, that clean us. You know, you told me to see. Okay, good. Okay, go ahead. Simcha, you have that shit. Thank you.